Hello, everyone. So, once upon a time, I took you through the list of all the ways the classics Seeker mold ended up getting used, and oh boy, it took a while to get through everything. So, I kind of wanted to do that again with another mold that has been routinely used and reused ad nauseum to the point where the mold is probably heavily decayed and dust by now. But to be frank, there aren't any that come close to how many times that Seeker mold was used. But nevertheless, we're going to try. And today we are going through the lifespan of the Beast Wars Dinobot mold, which, as if you grew up in the 90s and you paid attention to the toy shelves, you saw a lot of plastic Raptors in the Transformers toy line, and for good reason. Popular character, super popular character, popular mold. If it's not the best mold, we'll admit, but you can't argue. It was the 90s, Jurassic Park happened, you could never sell enough Raptors. It's just how it went. So let's take a look, because there's a lot of different variations and a lot of different weird ways Dinobot came out. We're starting with the classic, the traditional, the original Wave 1 Dinobot here, seen in his traditional raw chicken color scheme. We make fun of it now because we have the buzzworthy Bumblebee version, which is very much looks like it would give you salmonella if you touched it. However, that is at least a somewhat accurate depiction. The original one is a little more skewed to the brown than the pink, so it's not the most like it doesn't look like he needs to be cooked. Like it actually looks like a shade of skin some animal may have at one time. You can see it is not close to how he looks in the show. We acknowledge that. So originally, they were going to go much closer to how the toy looked, but the designers on the show kept altering, kept adapting, and kept modifying it until it looked, well, appropriately cool for the character that they knew they were going to make Dinobot into. So we got a toy that looks nothing like the character in the show. But you know what? It was close enough for 1996, so we will just go with it. Back then, they had to justify the fact that they were putting a dinosaur among the Maximals, who were traditionally mammals, sea creatures, birds, when the dinosaurs were always Predacons, because the Dinobots in G1 were good guys. So the one that is named Dinobot can be a good guy. It lets them add a little bit more variety to the Maximal side and is what led to him being the character we know now, the former Predacon seeking honor amongst the Maximals, even if he's not entirely happy about the change inside all the time. But it's why we love Dinobot. So this mold is how it came out in America and in Japan, complete with all this translucent orange that was a thing for some reason. Now, Takara tried to course correct the toy a little bit. The initial batch was in the American color scheme, but as you can see, later releases by Takara actually had him a little bit closer to the tones of the actual cartoon. So obviously, it's the same paint mask, so all the stripes and spots are in the same places. However, we do bring in a much richer brown to kind of convey the character a little bit better. I think it's nice to acknowledge that that color just did not work in the slightest. This kind of begins a trend amongst Takara. Once upon a time, you bought a toy from Takara because they had more budget to create something paint wise and a figure that looked a lot better. I don't know if it's just toys in Japan got allocated more budget or if like the fact that shipping from China was so much cheaper because it's a much shorter distance. I don't know why, but they had more money to make the decos more show accurate, more special. They would add in metallic paints and chrome whenever they could. They would lavish toys with paint to make them as show accurate as possible. And this is somewhere around where that started. Beast like this is like one of the first instances I can remember where Takara upgraded a toy from how it looked in America. Moving on, All right, we have another iteration of Dinobot. This comes from the Fox Kids lineup. And if you don't know what that is, Fox Kids was the first network to air Beast Wars. And I say network because Beast Wars began as a syndicated cartoon, shopped out to local networks. It was only in like the last year of the show's run that they got picked up by Fox Kids. So, with the eventual intention of putting Beast Machines as part of the Fox Kids lineup on Saturday mornings. With that in mind, they decided that with a renewed interest in the original designs for Beast Wars, let's do a run of classic toys from the first year or two of all the major show characters. But we don't want to just rerun things, so we're going to do a completely new color scheme, and thus we have the Fox Kids Dinobot. And that's pretty much how a lot of the Dinobots would end up. I believe this one was originally called Livewire Dinobot until they decided to cut all of the extraneous parts of the names off. All the Fox Kids had some sort of secondary name that never made it to the packaging. So, Livewire Dinobot. All right. Not a bad color scheme, by the way. They ditched the translucent plastic. Hooray. And yeah, it still sticks to the show's tan, but I don't mind the red. I don't mind it. Let's move on. Let's jump close to a decade later. It's Beast Wars' 10th anniversary. Hasbro decides to celebrate with some reissues, with a build-a-figure piece, some free episodes on DVDs. But we also got this. The closest Hasbro would ever come to making Dinobot work and make him as show accurate as they could. You can see the color tones way closer than they had ever been before. The dark tones are there. The striping is still the traditional shape, but they still tried as hard as they could to try and make this toy work as close to the original Dinobot as they could. They added in a lot more of the blue. You can see it in the midsection and the knees. And this is the only iteration that actually goes as far as to paint all the bones across the shins, which makes them stand out a lot more. And yeah, that's actually a particularly nice look. At least the only time that Hasbro would ever attempt to paint the bones, I should say. Now, at this point, we should mention that they've also now added ratchets to the shoulders, so they are also a lot more secure than they used to be. But in this release, that's probably not what you want, because this toy is heavily affected by GPS. Pretty much every shade of brown in this toy is susceptible to GPS fracturing. And it only took like 3 years for this toy to start self-destructing on people. I can remember reviewing this toy, and the comment section would tell me, I don't know how you got through that without it breaking. At the time, I didn't know it was a GPS victim, much less that both shades of brown it used were potential hazards. It's a really nice look. It's a really nice look for the toy, and yeah, it's as close as Hasbro would ever come using the original mold. So, yeah, it was a nice attempt. So we move on to Takara's attempt in Telemoka. Takara had an interesting approach. So their goal was to try and prioritize how the robot mode looked rather than the beast mode. So you come up with a completely different airbrushing pattern. You try to get the colors as roughly as close as they were, as that would work on this mold. They painted the bones as well on the legs, which is a little bit more subtle than Hasbro, because they use kind of like a weird greenish tint. This is more of a bone color. But what you're ending up with here is a really strange take on the beast mode. The beast mode kind of looks like a burn victim. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it just looks like he's just like patches of soot, like a cartoon explosion just happened right in front of his face. That's the impression I get from the beast modes. Yeah. Now, the upside is the robot mode actually does look rather nice. I would still argue it's not trying as hard as the Hasbro one did to come to show accuracy. It's just a different interpretation, really, and which one you prefer at the end of the day is entirely up to you. This one does have two distinct advantages. Number one, it's the only time that the mutant head ever got painted, so it actually has some variations going through it. And also, Takara went through the trouble of tampographying a mouth onto Dinobot. Previous to this, it was a mouth plate like a traditional like Grimlock style toy would have. So this is the first time Dinobot had a mouth on a figure, even if it was just flat paint. Like I said, Hasbro and Takara both tried as hard as they could in different directions to make this toy work as a show-accurate Dinobot. And let's just face it, there's just way too many inconsistencies between the designs. It's just, they went a little bit too far from the original toy to ever make this mold work as show-accurate. But credit to both for trying. And also, as far as I know, this one is not nearly as fragile as the Hasbro one. So if you're trying to decide between the two, you might not have a choice. Let's move on, shall we? To a completely different character, and one you definitely don't have another choice of. This was the very first repaint of Dinobot still within the Beast Wars line. This is Grimlock. And continuity-wise is interesting on this one because they kind of... modern fiction, like comic books that do feature this design and do actually like flat out explain, yeah, this is the original Grimlock. This is G1 Grimlock in a brand new maximal form. And they were a little bit more vague about it with the original toy line. Now keep in mind, there is a lot of bios that kind of suggest the characters might have been somebody else in the past, because that was still like they were trying to loosely connect it to like G1. They were still supposed to be the original characters, that kind of thing. But in this case, it became much more overt over the years. So the Dalmatian Raptor here, of course, is a very famous sufferer of GPS, the legs especially, particularly because they are ball joint sockets, which means they are under constant pressure, which means they're always at risk of self-destruction. This is not a toy. If you own this toy sealed, you never open it. Not because you want the value to maintain, but because you don't want it falling apart. That plastic bubble inside is probably the only thing holding it together at this point. And if you have it loose, you're on your own. But moving on, we have with us another iteration. So now we've moved on to Armada, and now this is Grimlock as well. However, it is a completely different take on Grimlock. It is technically... I say Armada because this was multi-packed in with other Armada toys. So the bubble for Armada's Deluxes was apparently so big you could stuff both a Deluxe and basic Beast Wars toy inside and create 2-packs, and that's what they did. So you'd go to a Walmart, and these would just be hanging up alongside the standard Armada toys, and yeah, it just seemed like you got a ton of toy for one package, and you did. It's like a $15 package. It's not that much now. Like, these have shot up way high in price. But it is a super cool set, and I really regret passing up on them because it was a really cool way. Like, because it's the only time they ever did, like, traditional Dinobot colors on the dinosaur molds of the Beast Wars cast. To a point, Swoop / Tyrannotron and Sludge kind of did their own thing. But then again, Sludge wasn't a Brontosaurus. It was an Iguanodon. So I guess that doesn't really count. Nevertheless, I digress. Grimlock here did get something akin to his traditional colors: silver, gold, red. Now, it's still using the traditional paint pattern. It's still using the traditional paint mask of Dinobot, but it doesn't look bad. It's a nice little throwback, even if it isn't a realistic coloration of a raptor. At the very least, you recognize it as a Dinobot, so you have that going for you. But let's move on to Takara, where we got some retooling going on and a lot more interesting things done. So meet Hardhead. So he is supposed to be I apologize to my dinosaur buffs if I pronounce it wrong, a Pachycephalosaurus, but he's not really one because that's really not how they look. Takara's credit, this is like back in the days when they tried to get a cheetah and a tiger to have the same mold. So, like, okay, credit where credit's due. They had to work with what they had. But no, this is like the headbutt dinosaur, which is ironic because it does have a headbutt gimmick. You close the jaw and the head pops up. You push the head back down, the jaw opens back up. So it does have like this really subtle headbutt gimmick. But it cannot angle its head down in any way, shape, or form to actually get that headbutt to actually hit something. So it's use your imagination or pretend he's attacking low-flying birds. One or the other. But this is the one where they actually started to resculpt and retool it. Obviously, the dinosaur head's been retooled and the gimmick has been added in. Because the toy already had like a hidden sword gimmick and a spinning blade gimmick. So let's throw a few more gimmicks in there. Why not? Uh, yeah, and then a completely new head, which is not a bad new head. And like the purple, the blue, silver, nice color scheme. Character-wise, he's pretty much what you would expect of somebody who spends his career hitting things with his head. So like yeah, it just picture that, and that's pretty much the character you got. Now, obviously, we cannot let this mold go. Hey, we have another excuse to release it, right? Right? So let's do it for Beast Machines and do Beast Machines incarnations of Dinobots, which were just random, either leftovers from Beast Wars or retools from, or like not even retools, but just like straight repaints from Beast Wars Neo. Or we don't even bother repainting it. We just put Magmatron in a US box and wish him the best of luck. Yeah, but we have another iteration here. So just in case just in case you had any kind of like imagining that this is like that we're getting like original with the names here between like like after Hardhead. This is Dinotron. Not Dinobot, Dinotron. Creative. Again, it's the same mold as Hardhead. I prefer the colors because this is it's me in green, but also I could kind of imagine a dinosaur in these colors more than I can the purple and the blue. It suffers the same flaws. It can't headbutt things on the ground. It has the same gimmicks. It's just for me, a preferable version of the mold, and that's not just because it's the only version I have, but I tend to like it. Like if I was just wanted to play with the mold, this is the version I would pick up. Probably because of my attraction to green, but also just because, yeah, like it's an interesting little toy to play with. And moving on from there, we have the best. Meet Thrustor. All right, so Beast Wars 2. You have basic Destrons who are vehicles fighting Cybertrons who are animals. So you have a nature versus machine theme. Thrust is something of a comedian. He is the jokey guy of the Destron team. They go through a process in the show. They get upgraded to Cyber Beast forms, and then you have this insane cyborg raptor that he becomes. Extreme retooling going on here to make him a brand new character. And you notice what goes on here that I absolutely love. It's the same concept as Transmetal 2. It's the organic mixed with the cybernetic. The difference here is that the Transmetal 2s had a really bad habit of just airbrushing color onto an entire form on the beast mode. So you lost all this shift between the organic and the machine, and it just became just like neutral colors and just like flat areas of color, or even worse in chrome. So you ended up with an incomplete package, something that's supposed to look cybernetic, but it all got washed together with all the poor and like quick paint jobs. This looks so much cooler in my opinion. The organic is left organic. The mechanical is heavily emphasized with silver parts and lots of wires done in reds and gunmetals. It's a super cool look. All of the Cyber Beasts look so cool, and all of them make me wish that the Transmetal 2 toys had gotten the same treatment at some point, even if it was a subline of Beast Wars Neo, even if it was an extension of Beast Machines, something, anything. So many of those toys went unrepainted, and here's what they should have done with them. And if you want to know how it looked if they had actually done that, look at Skybite. I only called it the best repaint a Transformer ever got. I love the Cyber Beasts. Absolutely love them. Yeah, I really wish this had been more of a thing. And I really wish the Kingdom Dinobot would get this treatment, but that's a lofty wish. So that is all 10 retail reuses of the Beast Wars Dinobot mold, but there is an 11th if you were super lucky because Japan did run a lucky draw for Beast Wars that did include an all-gold Dinobot. So, one of these exists somewhere in the world. If GPS has not claimed it, it is still out there somewhere. Someone's got it, and this is about the only photography proof I have that this one actually exists. So, there you go, an 11th version of the Dinobot mold. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you were educated. I hope you discovered a few takes on Dinobot that you didn't know, or at the very least learned a few different characters that you otherwise might not have learned about. So, as always, thank you for watching. Thank you very much for supporting, whether it's a couple bucks on Patreon, or if you're just hitting like and subscribe. That helps me a lot too, and it keeps the channel alive. Thank you guys. I will see you next time. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.